everyone. My name is Zara Qaiser. I'm the Gender and Economic Inclusion Consultant for IFC, and I'd like to welcome you all to Climate2Equal Pakistan's first learning webinar on green jobs for women in Pakistan. So I'd like to start off with giving just a quick overview of what this initiative is about. So Climate2Equal Pakistan is a peer learning platform that brings together private companies pledging on gender inclusive climate action. And it aims to build on the awareness, skills, and commitment of private companies to include women in company-led climate action. This initiative was launched back in January, and since then we've had about 20 private sector companies pledge on gender inclusive climate action. Under this initiative, we conduct a series of learning webinars like the one today, and in-depth capacity building workshops to support pledging companies in implementing their pledges. So we have private companies pledging on various areas, for example, increasing the representation of female leaders or employees in the design of companies' climate projects, creating awareness amongst the company on gender and climate, and many others. We also have companies pledging on identifying or creating green jobs in the company's operations. And so the purpose of today's webinar is to explore what green jobs are, what they actually mean, and highlight how private companies can identify or create green jobs for women in their business operations, map out these jobs, and then train female employees so that they can transfer into these jobs to make business operations more sustainable. So I'd like to begin by introducing the speakers who have joined us today. So first we have Dr. Mohsen Gul. Dr. Mohsen is the Senior Project Manager at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. He brings over a decade of experience working in multilateral development organizations. He is currently the technical lead for design on Strategic Intelligence Hub for Youth Entrepreneurship in Asia Pacific, curated by UNDP. Mohsen has led several socio-environmental research projects in multiple countries and regional contexts, including on gender-responsive green jobs. Next, we have Maha Kamal. She is a founding member and co-chair of Women in Energy Pakistan. She is an international public policy specialist with a focus on climate and energy policy. She was awarded the Chevening Scholarship for Masters in International Public Policy from Queen Mary University of London. She received a distinction on her dissertation, which was on assessing conflicting goals, assessing the Paris Agreement through the lens of energy security. And in the past, she's also worked on climate governance, energy and water security at the Sustainable Development Policy Institute. And then we have Ayesha Aziz, who is the Group Manager Sustainability for one of the largest business conglomerates and a leading packaging company, Packages Limited. Since 2017, Ayesha has been a part of the sustainability department of Bulisha Packaging and has been responsible for successfully leading the group's sustainability initiatives. In 2021, she was moved to the group level to coordinate sustainability strategy and initiatives across portfolio companies. And in her current role, she is working on shaping the Packages Group ESG and sustainability strategy and drives the implementation of all ESG principles and activities into business practices. Packages is actually one of the pledging companies under the Climate2Equal platform, and one of their pledges is on creating green jobs for women. So Dr. Mohsen, Maha, and Ayesha, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're really looking forward to this webinar and hearing from all three of you. So before we actually begin, I'm just going to do a really quick icebreaker. I'm going to launch a poll, and you can select the option that you think is correct. And also, may I please request everyone to please mute yourselves, keep yourselves on mute until the Q&A session where we'd like to hear from you. Okay, so I'm just going to launch the poll. Just give me a second. Okay. So we can just take a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds for everyone to select the option that you think is correct. Okay, so I'll just read it out as well. Globally, for every 100 men who consider themselves to have green talent, there are how many women who consider themselves to have green talent? So 20 women, 31 women, 62 women, 87 women, or 120 women. I'm going to see if I can view the results. Okay, so I see that. I'm not sure if everyone can see the results. Can everyone see the results? Okay, so we have most of the people saying 20 women. So the answer is actually 62 women. So for every 100 men who consider themselves to have green talent, there are 62 women who consider themselves to have green talent. So that is quite a big difference.
Hello.
Hi, yes.
I actually cannot see anything on the screen. It's just the title slide which is appearing.
Is that true for everyone? Dalia, Nazish, do you want to confirm?
No, I can see it. I can see it.
Same here, Zara. I can't see as well.
Any other attendee who can't see?
The poll has been removed, right, Zara? I think we can all see the title slide now.
Yeah.
But when you had the poll up, I could see it.
I saw the results as well when the poll was up.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out. But can you all hear me and see me? You can just thumbs up.
Yes.
Hi, Zara. Zara, I think the poll is front of me. I can see the results. So if anyone wants to, confirm, I can read it out and
Okay.
I can tell the results.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you so much. So we can close the poll now and move on because I know we're running short of time. So if everyone can kindly just keep themselves on mute and I'll continue. Okay. So with that, I'm going to like to invite Dr. Mohsen to help us understand what green jobs and green jobs are and what do green jobs mean for women in Pakistan. So Mohsen, over to you. I'm going to share your presentation.
Thank you so much, Zara. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever in the world you're joining us from. I'm Dr. Mohsen Gul, and I'm very excited to be speaking to you about what are green jobs. But I did get the fact wrong, so maybe I'm not the best person to talk about this now that I've realized. My factual knowledge on the subject is a bit thin. Anyways, it's a difficult thing to define what green jobs are actually. It's not as simple as saying, oh, I work in an IT job. Anything and everything can be green, or anything or anything cannot be green. It's about the lens we apply in defining what green jobs are. Next slide, please. So green jobs have been defined majorly by two main organizations around the world that are acceptable definitions. One is ILO, the International Labour Organization, which goes on to define green jobs as according to sectors. So, for example, if you work in agriculture, environmental management, ecotourism, some other sectors here and there, mostly primary industries, you are likely to be working in a greener work environment or a greener job, versus the United Nations Environmental Systems Accounting Framework, which also defines green jobs, but has a very skewed definition in terms of if you belong to agriculture sector, this sector, then you are technically working in a green job. But this definition is problematic when you start to apply different lens on its definition. The first thing is no job can be greener in its true sense if it is not decent. Now, decent work or decent job is a word you might have come across used a lot in labor sense from International Labor Organization, and there's a big push in this just transition world onto having inclusive jobs and decent jobs to begin with. A decent job is where you're paid equally, you're included in decision making, and you think that you have a fair, equitable experience of doing the job. Now, job may be green, but it not may be decent. For example, if I am a woman working in agriculture or farms on, but have a very less pay or not adequately taken care of nobody's really taking care of. If I'm working in heat all day, it's not entirely decent experience, so it may not fit into the broader definition of green job which we are having a conversation on here today. But then jobs can also be green and decent. For example, if I'm a young female engineer working in a solar power plant where I am equitably paid and my occupational health and safety is taken care of, then I have a win-win situation. I have a green and a decent experience. But then in other cases, jobs may not be decent, not either green, and those are the ones which we don't like. For example, if I work in an oil and power sector, definitely not green to begin with, and maybe if I work on an oil rig in a high you know uh, vulnerability context, I'm most likely not to have a decent experience as well. So whenever you think of a green job, always thinking in the lens of inclusivity and decent work. Only then your full definition of green work becomes more contextualized to a just experience that we're trying to create across employment for all. The second lens we can apply is green does not mean devoid of blue. Now, this is where blue economy, green economy, and all these big words start to come in. But green economy widely is more umbrella term which can engulf blue jobs as well. So blue jobs are, for example, in the fishing sector or the marine sector. So often when we focus on green jobs, we forget the blue jobs. But green and blue jobs go hand in hand, and they are equally important in many environments for livelihoods of a lot of women in the fishing communities and in the marine communities. And so it's very important that when we think of green jobs, we also consider blue jobs. Next slide, please. Uh, so in context of Pakistan, what would green jobs mean? So I used a futures thinking tool called Futures Triangle to make sense of this. What is so basically, women traditionally in Pakistan are marginalized in access to employment, right? So particularly in informal economy sectors where there is high number of women, so mostly not having a decent work experience, but likely to be making the bulk of agriculture sector and primary industry sectors. Which, on the other hand, we already know the gender gap is high in Pakistan. Most of the vulnerable employment belongs to women. The unemployment ratio is higher for a female in the country. For context, less than 1% women are employed in the energy sector in the country. So we understand that there are so many barriers that are barring women's experience in taking up greener and decent jobs. But then we are also seeing more promotion of employment in environmental sustainability sector in the current and the future. Demand for greener technical skills and job roles that are needed. So we recognize that more and more female are trying to come up and take up greener roles in their work, but we don't really know where to start. And that is, or we really don't know how to support them in the best way possible. Next slide, please. Which means we had to start somewhere. So I was very fortunate to lead this work with United Nations Development Program in Pakistan, where we used ILO's guidance on how to assess green jobs potential in any developing country, which essentially this complex diagram basically looks at four tasks. What's the total employment frame of a country? How many of them are environment related? And in middle of this, how many of them are core environmental related employments that link to women or any stakeholder group that you're looking at? And then what are the direct and indirect employment ways through which any stakeholder group can be contributing to the green economy frame? We did add another task to this, which was skills gap assessment, because we recognize supply and demand are two separate things. We may think there is supply of green employment, but is there demand on the other side? And then if there is demand, are the women in the right capacity to be, or do they have the agency by default, or we need to help them to have the right skills to be able to take greener or bluer jobs in the country? Next slide, please. Which meant we could undertake a horizon scan, and we started to identify that most of the literature around the world is Western or is coming from a global North context. For example, how many women around us are taking up, you know, uh, for example, are they doing Airbnb type of work in their community? Maybe not, but they are most probably working as livestock rearers. They're doing sericulture of wool rearing in their primary industry context or cottage industry context. So there are so many ways through which we had to first identify what is and what is not common practice around each sector in Pakistan when we looked at the primary sector, the secondary and tertiary. Next slide, please. Which meant we were able to identify, for example, existing and potential green jobs in this secondary industry could not just be about women ending up working in the textile domain, could also mean they can be possibly helping with the metallurgist work or waste management and recycling. And as a circular economy as a concept improves, likes of packages can engage more women in green jobs to not just sustain but create newer roles that would be needed. Next slide, please. Which means we also could then look at this in a more wider sense. This is a diagram from a work I did for UN Environment, and I would highly recommend you read this. This document talks about how every job can be green, not just some sectors. And one of the examples in the textile industry, if you look at the cradle to grave context, starting from the very onset of fiber farming to reuse and downcycling or upcycling of the material, every step of that job or every step of the value chain can be greener, and you can engage people on each stage whose job will then become greener by default. So it's about thinking in a wider sense of green jobs as a domain and not just having a sustainability manager on the team who will be considered to do green job. It can be from the very driver to the senior a C-suite member. All of them jobs can be greener in a sense if linked and made decent in that context. Next slide, please. Uh, Right. So similarly, one of the things we don't recognize is that the quaternary or tertiary sectors could be greener as well. We often are we just think because you're in the field or in the environment outside, most likely your job is greener. Or if you're working in an industry that is linked to primary raw materials, then you possibly doing a green job. But I may be working in research consulting and my job may be greener as well. For a lot of people, for example, Zara's job can be considered a green job, versus if I'm a teacher who teaches science and I include climate and environment chapters on my daily basis, I may be teaching environmental education. By that virtue, my job is greener as well, right? So it's about defining it in a sense that any job could have margins and on a spectrum. It could be greener to one extent or more, but all jobs can be greener in that way. Next slide, please. One of the examples I really love is how can you start to look at traditional fields and how can you think, for example, if I'm a lawyer, what is the margin of me doing green every day in my job? And by that virtue, my jobs start to become greener. Similarly, for each sector, you can start to think on tangible and intangible ways through which you can contribute to making your career greener. And this is something I did work with LinkedIn on, and I was celebrated as UK's LinkedIn voice on green jobs, where my premise is anyone and everyone can start to contribute in one way or the other to the wider environmental protection domain through making their daily work routines greener. Next slide, please. One of my very good friends.
So sorry to cut you, Mohsen. Do you mind
Yeah,
just wrapping it up in a minute, maybe, so that
yeah,
we
I'm
can
gonna
just back in
wrap
time?
just after this
Okay,
slide, please.
thank you.
And then, so if you can go to the next slide, please. One of the very good examples I know is, for example, music can be green and blue as well. So this guy Shatab, who won UN Environment Young Champion Award, was able to use plastic bottles to create music. And by virtue of what raw materials or things he was just using, he was able to convert his career into a greener point. Just one point before I go away is we also looked at the skill gaps, and we recognized that women in Pakistan have more agency than you would like to believe. Like almost all of us thought the green talent was a lesser number than more, and we need to put in a conducive ecosystem to be able to help women across domains and sectors to start to believe that they can develop their greener talent and contribute to it. I'll stop here and back to you, Zara. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohsen. And sorry to cut you off, just wanted to, keeping track of time. But I think we all, have been not very clear on what green jobs are. And I think your presentation has really helped us understand that context of green jobs, particularly in Pakistan. And building on that context, I'd like to now invite Maha to talk about how companies, private sector companies, can create green jobs or identify green jobs in their companies for women in their business operations. Over to you, Maha. I'm just sharing your presentation.
Thank you, Zara, and thank you to Mohsen for giving such a good introduction on green jobs. My area today is going to be focused on a roadmap for green jobs, particularly from a gender angle. So I'm representing Women in Energy Pakistan today, of which I'm the founding co-chair. And so we're going to be looking at green jobs as a whole, specifically focusing on specific strategies that the private sector can undertake in order to green their jobs from a gender angle. Next, please. So first, we're going to be focusing on a roadmap for green jobs. I'm going to be linking that to the just transition and what that means, building upon what Mohsen had said too about green jobs and how that needs to really fall into the framework of a just transition. So we're going to be linking our roadmap to a just transition. I'm then going to be sharing a few examples too specifically from Women in Energy Pakistan's work on green jobs and how we've specifically added to the conversation on green jobs. And I'm going to be ending with a way forward on specific steps that companies can take in order to green their jobs. Next, please. So specifically, today I'm going to be actually using a framework from this World Bank initiative called We Power for South Asia, which is an initiative that focuses on women in the power sector and looks at the entire pipeline. So I applied that particular framework to greening jobs from a gender angle. There are a lot of different strategies that companies can take in order to not only green their existing jobs and be part of this whole conversation on inclusivity and a just transition, but there are specific steps that companies can take and look at the entire pipeline as a whole. So from the very inception to the very end of the cycle, and how you can actually green jobs. So number one is that you can actually invest in the pipeline by increasing female enrollment in internship and training programs. So you need to ensure that you have quotas and specific targets to ensure that you are having gender parity when it comes to enrollment in your internship and training programs. Now, what that does is that creates a pipeline to ensure that you have qualified female candidates that are hopefully going to be a future asset and a hiring pool. So that's absolutely of fundamental importance, and that's the first step that companies can take in order to green jobs from a gender angle. The second step that you can take is that you need to reassess and reevaluate the recruitment policies and your human resource policies as a whole from a gender angle. Now, what that does is that you need to essentially have a critical eye and look at what policies that you can take in the recruitment process in order to ensure that you're hiring from a gender parity pool and you're ensuring that you have gender diversity when it comes to the recruitment. So you can do this by partnering with academia, through civil society and nonprofit organizations that are specifically working on gender. You may utilize existing local networks, and you can use all of these to ensure that you are accessing a talented female pool in order to strengthen your recruitment policies. Part of this can be that you can organize job fairs and networking events and be very mindful of the gender angle when it comes to recruitment as well. So that's number 2. Number 3 is that you have to look at your existing talent and ensure that female employees and gender diverse employees in your organization are being professionally developed. So they have access to mentorship programs, to leadership trainings, to coaching. And this is absolutely crucial because when we think of green jobs, and that's something Mohsen touched upon as well, we often think of this reskilling gap. So there's a gap between what green jobs actually require and what some existing jobs are actually doing at the moment. So that skill gap you need to fill through this continued professional development, through mentorship, leadership trainings, and coaching. So that's number 3. Number 4 is that you have to retain existing talent as well. So we often see, when you look at the entire pipeline in companies and in greening jobs, we often see that female talent tends to sometimes not be retained, and there can be structural reasons for this as well. So for example, in WePower in South Asia, their study found that there were barriers to women when it came to increased household responsibilities, and specifically the sometimes because of changes in their family structure and lack of support that actually led to female employees not actually being retained. So there was oftentimes early career females and female talent were there, but they weren't able to be retained in order to reach mid-career or senior roles. And so that's of fundamental importance for companies to consider when it comes to this roadmap for greening jobs, is that you have to retain your existing talent through ensuring that your human resource policies, such as services for returning mothers, daycare services to ensure that children can be taken care of, other care responsibilities. For example, oftentimes women of the household are sometimes more responsible for other caring responsibilities, such as caring for the elderly. So ensuring that you may have nursing services that can be perhaps provided. So thinking from that your talents angle. So what would be something that your female employees would require, so that you can have that survey done within your organization to ensure what are the specific needs of your existing female employees, and then cater and specifically target that retention of that existing talented. For example, we found out in field jobs and technical roles in the power sector, for example, when it comes to greening jobs, that a lack of separate toilets, for example, was a hindrance, or safe transportation. So you really have to think from your specific jobs angle, your specific industry, and do a survey of your existing female employees to find out what their specific needs are, and then focus on that retention. And lastly, and this is number 5, and this is of absolute fundamental importance, because we have found that when it comes to greening jobs from a gender angle, role models are of absolute importance. That actually has an effect on your entire pipeline. And so number 5 is actually institutional and policy change. So you really have to foster a culture of sustainability and of gender equity by ensuring that women leadership, board membership, and senior roles are actually there as role models for women. So part of this could actually even be quotas. For example, we found that in Punjab specifically, they had instituted a quota in board membership. So 1/3 of women had to be part of the board position. So that's something that other companies can make part of their own charter and actually institute as a step, and the most important step that can actually foster this culture of sustainability and gender equity. Next, please. So this is an example from Women in Energy Pakistan. Women in Energy Pakistan worked with the United Nations Development Program UNDP on an experimentation innovation challenge for young women in energy. And this was specifically focused on green solutions and innovative green solutions when it came to renewable energy, circular economy, climate change adaptation, climate smart agriculture, air pollution, and green cities. So these were the specific areas that this innovation challenge was actually focusing on. And through this innovation challenge, we were able to empower young women to actually think outside the box and make their role when it came to green jobs as well. And so this was a process where we really had a lot of outreach. We selected the winners. So 5 winners were actually selected for this, and their innovation challenge were actually supported in order to add to their voice when it comes to green job, because oftentimes we see that the framework needs to change and there needs to be more innovation and design thinking in order to meet the challenges of the future. So this specific program was able to target that. And then we were able to share their experiences and success for broader impact. Next, please. So this is another example of greening jobs. So if you recall that we have a skill gap when it comes to green jobs, and specifically we in Women in Energy Pakistan have noted that specifically for renewable energy sectors such as solar energy and wind energy, oftentimes there was a skill gap when it came to the technical knowledge for basically improving and accelerating the efforts on renewable energy. And so we partnered with Shams Power and TEDx Lahore in order to have these solar trainings for female engineers. And we've had our second cohort just graduate. And we were able to target specifically female engineers and technicians. So it's very targeted and it had a very technical focus. And we trained female engineers and female technicians in this gap when it comes to solar energy. And this was part of our larger efforts to ensure that the transition is a just one. The transition we were focusing on needs to be inclusive and needs to ensure gender parity, and it really needs to have the principles of diversity, equity, and social inclusion. And how you can do that is, again, be mindful of what the gap is and then have specific policies targeting that. Next, please. So essentially, now that I've shared with you a roadmap for greening jobs, the 5 takeaways that we have, and I've shared 2 examples with you as well from Women in Energy Pakistan's own initiative, is that we can really have to be very specific and mindful of this problem to begin with and have the entire lens shift when it comes to greener jobs. So you really need to have to invest in the pipeline. You have to reassess recruitment policies. You have to prioritize professional development. You have to retain existing talent. And then all of this needs to drive institutional change. So have that that shift in the mindset. So these are some ways that companies can, these are some steps that companies can take in order to green jobs from a gender angle. And I'm happy to share specific insights when it comes to specific questions that you may have as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Maha. Thanks so much for sharing that. So the reason why we chose green jobs for women to be the topic of our first webinar was because when we were working with private companies under the Climate2Equal initiative, we received a lot of interest on this topic, but so many companies weren't sure where to start and how they could actually create green jobs. And so, a lot of the attendees today are from the private sector, and I'm sure we all found that presentation very useful. So now I'd like to move on to Aisha to invite her to share packages experience in creating or identifying green jobs for women through their Climate to Equal pledge. Aisha, over to you. I'm just sharing your presentation.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Zara, for giving us this opportunity. And both the speakers before me, I learned a lot from you as well because we as an organization and myself as an individual are on a learning path. And this is something that I think that there's a lot of opportunity to learn from each other. And this is an excellent platform to, just do that. So, when you talk about packages, it's a huge company. A lot of people in Pakistan definitely know it's one of the largest conglomerates. So we have 15, 16 companies of different diverse nature of businesses under the umbrella of Packages Group. Main industry that we are linked with is packaging and associated products. The slogan of the company from decades is creating a better tomorrow. So that is basically driving the sustainability agenda. And I'll just share a bit about how our gender initiatives and how our gender strategy and the climate strategy are linked and why we pledged on creating green jobs for women and what were the steps that we took. And we're still, as I said, on a learning path. We're still, this is something that is developing as we go forward. And, we'll just share what we learned in the last few months. So next slide, please, Ara. Next slide. So the pledge that we took, we had two other pledges. So this one that we're talking about today is to identify and develop green jobs and or ways of greening jobs in the company's operations and train female employees so that they can transfer into those jobs and or recruit women into those jobs. So we just focused on what the pledge was and how we can identify and what are the existing green jobs in the company, and if there are any other jobs that could be transitioned towards a greener portfolio. So if we talk about the company, if we can move to the next slide. So the company was established in 56, so nearly 7 decades ago. And the slogan was to create a better tomorrow for the people, planet, and sustainable prosperity. We have presence in 4 different countries, including Pakistan, Sri Lanka, South Africa, and Canada. So when we talk about gender, in the 1980s, we established our first daycare center for our only female manager at that time. And when we developed our daycare center, there was no other daycare center that we could, take inspiration from. When you talk about the priorities concerning women, this is something that can, demonstrate how the company thinks about promoting gender equality. We have very aggressive gender equality targets, diversity targets. So 35% of all new hires have to be women. That has been, driven across the group. We provide, there's a daycare I've mentioned already, transportation to female employees, and there are many other initiatives as well. We have an ACTS platform, which is short for actively caring through sharing. It is an internal platform for capacity building, mentoring, guiding, and for helping women in their professional development and their personal issues as well. Just this year, we became a signatory to the WEPs, the Women Empowerment Principles, so that this journey of climate to equal, it goes on even after the program is over. About the company's initiatives on climate change, we manufacture paper from agricultural waste instead of wood pulp. So we do use wood pulp as well. That is also through sustainably managed forests. But wheat straw is a huge part of our operations, and we've been manufacturing paper since the beginning of the company through wheat straw. There's a state-of-the-art biomass boiler and 45% of our energy needs are met through renewable sources, including the solar and biomass. There's a huge effluent treatment plant in Kasur, which is one of the largest in the country. We were the first company in Pakistan to get the ISO 14064 certification for the greenhouse gases. And we also installed Pakistan's first solvent recovery plant. So when we talk about companies' commitment towards sustainability, these initiatives and investments, although these are just a few of what the company has done, so we are very serious about climate change and our environmental responsibility. And we are equally serious about promoting women and not just recruiting more women, but also providing them opportunities to grow and excel in their organizations. Next slide, please. So why we pledged was the when it's an interesting coincidence, because when this program was started in January earlier this year, that was just the time that the sustainability function gained its own identity, and it was formed as a standalone department. And me, as a mechanical engineer from decades ago, have always been, the first one and the only one in a lot of situations. So this was always something that I personally felt, that women need more representation in technical fields. And since I have been in a green job for over 2 decades now, I do feel that, this is something that, more women need to have an opportunity to grow into. So this was an opportunity. So on a personal level, I felt strongly about both the initiatives, and on the company's level, I just explained that both these things are very important to the company. So that's why we pledged, and we were in a position, but we were developing the sustainability roadmap for the company, and also developing a gender strategy for the company. So that was a very good time to pledge on this. And since we are everyone knows that gender equality is a central aspect of sustainable development. Almost all SDGs have an aspect of gender equality in some form in them. So it's you cannot think about sustainable development by ignoring women or leaving them behind. And so all these things, when we talk about our ESG strategy, gender equality and climate action, they are emerging as material topics for us. So we had all the reasons to pledge to identify more green jobs, create more green jobs for women, and give them a voice on a company level at least. Next slide. So what we did was that first we assessed how many, what kind of green jobs do we have, existing green jobs. So we did have a few women in the EHS department, which is Environment, Health and Safety department, which were, you could, link them to, they are the green jobs. And when we were developing the new department and developing new JDs for new hires in this central department, there was an opportunity to, create positions which were related to climate. And, and there was an opportunity to hire and recruit more women in this. So since we pledged, we've hired 4 new females in the group sustainability team. So we have an ESG and sustainability associate. They've all joined online today as well. Energy and resource efficiency associate, a carbon and climate change associate, and an environmentalist. So these women have been inducted in the Central Sustainability Department and are helping us implement all the sustainability and ESG related initiatives across the group. Um, in addition to that, just like Maha mentioned that, creating a pipeline. So we've provided internship opportunity to 3 females with environmental engineering and management backgrounds. And we plan to extend this opportunity to others as well. So for the pledge, we've pledged to do this for 6 engineers who will be working on energy and climate related projects. Next one, please. When we were talking about the existing opportunities, so we have just embarked on this journey, and we are working on our GHG emissions. So we were working on developing a carbon team for the group. So in the beginning, there were just 2 women from all the companies who were part of the carbon team. But now we've trained and inducted about 7 women. Um not only engineers, but we also have some accountants who are part of the group carbon team. And similarly, we're working on a group level energy management system certification right now. So in the group energy team as well, we've recruited women from across all functions and all companies of the group. Next slide, please. The second part was to find out ways for transitioning traditional jobs into greener jobs. So for this, we identified women from various departments which are not traditionally green, for example, finance and HR and sales. And so we have nominations of 40 women from all companies of the group from various departments, and they will go through green skills trainings. So we have planned 4 workshops in the next 1 year. The first one is planned for the next month, and they will get these green skills. Maybe we will not be able to see results or an impact just after these trainings, but the idea behind this was that we increase climate sensitivity amongst these jobs, and their decision making would be influenced. When they're taking decisions in their routine jobs, it would be more climate sensitive, and in this way we could transition into a greener workforce. So far, we've conducted a workshop on gender and climate change. It was just to spread awareness on how climate change impacts women and how women can play a role in, reducing the impact of climate change. We've also conducted an energy management training for the energy team. So this is what we have done so far. Next slide, please.
Okay, Aisha, do you mind just wrapping up, please? Sorry to cut you.
No, this is just the end now. So what we wanted was to have more women at all levels of the organization, and to increase the gender sensitivity and climate sensitivity across the group. And the idea is to eventually be an employer of choice for the new generation, because a lot of young people want to be associated with the companies who have better ESG strategies and policies. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the challenges that we had were that since it's an old organization, it's a very traditional organization. There's not a lot of the sustainability, ESG, climate change. These are relatively new topics, so there's not a lot of understanding and acceptance of these concepts across the board. So it's a bit difficult to make them understand at this point. It's a typically male-dominated industry, even globally. There's a lack of available female talent. I had to really ask HR to get resumes of women engineers for the positions that we've recruited in. And then there's a lack of awareness on the impact of climate change as well. And then obviously resources, financial time, and expertise. So these are the challenges that we have faced so far. Next slide, please. So if somebody is asking about what we recommend, what we've learned is that we need to each organization is different, so we need to find out what works in the organization, and the most important thing is to get top leadership commitment. Otherwise, it's very difficult to get any initiative the due that it needs. Rather than having an approach of making a huge change instantly, it's good to start small and celebrate those wins along the way. Uh, Try to create more opportunities for women, and do encourage recruiting women in technical positions. And as a part of any company's gender strategy, it should be a safe environment for women to work in. And there should be more awareness on climate change and women's role in community development, and also to promote women in decision-making positions, not just recruit them at grassroots levels. There should be, like Maha mentioned as well, family-friendly policies, and we should support girls in STEM fields through internships and other opportunities. So this is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maha. And sorry I had to cut you off. Thanks so much for sharing your experience, Package's experience in pledging on green jobs. And I hope that everyone listening in, mostly from the private sector, will take inspiration from the work that Packages is doing. I know we are short on time, but I'd just like to quickly open the floor for questions. We have our three speakers here who are here to answer your questions. If you can kindly maybe raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or if you don't want to speak out, you can type it in the Q&A box, and then we can read it out. We can, we have 10 minutes, and then maybe until 4 o'clock, and then at 4 o'clock we'll have the final concluding remarks by Nazish. Okay, so
Just a quick housekeeping request as well. If we can all turn on our cameras towards the end of the questions, so that everybody's picture can be seen, so we can take a screenshot.
okay, sure, Nazish. Okay, so we can start with Asad. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First of all, I must say a very great effort must be acknowledged. So a huge round of applause for the efforts and the people who were behind this all great effort. I think it's a question and also a comment as well. First, I'll come around the comment, and that is that I think number of work is going right now around in the reforms around the ESGs, the compliance and the governance part of it as well. But somehow when it comes from the public sector side, or for doing it for the public sector based directorates and entities, that is something which is more right now in the discussions and talks. But in terms of the convergence into the policy documents, that is still somewhere under discussions. So number of, I believe, development partners along with the regulatory institutions are planning some advocacy awareness sessions, working on the policy draft as well, but still no concrete thing around. So what is, as a second step or as a central point, is there any responsible organization as a central point for these all green budgeting, green skills? Is there any? If I'm not aware of, because right now a number of work has been done into the bits and pieces and in silos. So that needs to be integrated. Is there any effort around that? Please give us an awareness around it. Sorry, my introduction. I working as a head of markets north for employer relations for ACCA Global in Pakistan, and we have been a part of few ESG based work. So there has been an ESG task force which ACC has been part of in collaboration with Infrazamin and few other important organizations. And rest, then we have few important policy and research based work around ESGs as well, where we have an important part on the green budgeting for the public finance professionals and also the green skills. So what we are also trying to do is, as a second step, is to create an integration point or a central forum where all the important entities who are working on ESGs come on board at one place and start converging into for our industries, whether we talk about SMEs or private sector. Your mic, Nazish, was muted.
So, Mohsen, would you like to answer that? Or shall
Yeah.
I think it's more towards Pakistan, so I can answer it as well if you'd.
I can start and maybe you can add, Nazir. So through UNDP, we tried to create a gender responsive roadmap for women in green jobs in Pakistan. So that was shared with the government. So some work's being done on that, as I'm aware. Planning Commission was also forming a gender accelerator to bring employment data in one place, because data remains a problem. But in all fairness, I think we all like to work on the softer interventions, which are capacity building and skills building, because we know that's an easy target, but a far far more difficult. One is to create actual roles and to be able to give that share of power and place which is very much needed for women in the space. So more and more private sector engagement with public sector is needed in this space. Not having a new policy will help. Integrating already existing policies, for example, the climate and gender action plan that Pakistan already recognizes climate and green jobs for women, need to be put in place better. Over to you, Nazish. Yeah.
Thank you for your question, Asad. I am going to be part of the closing, so I'll just give you a little background about the Pakistan Business Council and the Center of Excellence in Responsible Business. So, the PBC, the Pakistan Business Council, as you know, is
we already working in collaboration with both as well.
Yeah.
As per my
Yeah, and so the center has actually been created to encourage a discussion on all of these aspects, and we are also working on a repository, sort of directory, in which we'll be encouraging businesses to enlist through our in this, and with that will basically the repository will become an area where such aspects on ESG and how businesses are understanding the climate or the response to air quality, and will be actually reported on or disclosed on by the business in themselves. So I think let's wait a month or so. I think that at that time when we launch our portal, we will be doing a webinar and announcing our sort of database or directory. So look forward. That will be more. I think that will probably answer your questions on this as well.
Thank you, Nazish. My point was also around the priority to from the public sector side. Regarding few initial meetings I had with the PND and Ministry of Finance on their cards, but politically designed things are in a way that it never comes on their top 5 or 10 cards still. So still there are only one person who is there as a change agent trying to work around things on the green budgeting side.
Well, thanks, Asad. I think that's a conversation we can take later. Any further questions? Can you raise your hands? I think Yasmin has.
There are some questions in the chat, Nazish.
So one is Yasmin says, I would like to know, question for Ayesha from Packages. I would like to know more details about acquiring female talent or recruitment. How does Packages do it? You mentioned internships for STEM students. Do you also do community outreach? Any other examples?
Okay, so like I mentioned that this was
apart from Ayesha.
So we do have a recruitment, division that takes care of that. And since this was all it's done in a very short time, and when we were already in the process of advertising the management trainees and our summer internships, so we didn't advertise it separately as a sustainability opportunity. There was a surprise for us that a lot of because when we hired management trainees, we asked for preferences, and none of them actually opted for sustainability, because a lot of people, when I was interviewing, because when in the first screening test, when they found out that there are opportunities, and I got to interview them in the second round, a lot of students said that they were not even aware that there are sustainability jobs. So we do need to work on that to advertise green jobs as it is. But right now, the company has the recruitment teams. They go to universities and colleges, and there is a the job fair like a normal routine. So, but we don't at the moment, we don't advertise sustainability as such. But I think we need to do that. But these internship opportunities that we provided, they came through our summer internship program, and we did get a few from our Women in Energy program of USAID. So that was how they reached out to us, and we agreed to provide opportunities to female students from that cohort as well.
Thank you, Ayesha. So I know that we're almost there towards the end of the webinar. So I'm just going to read out one more question, and maybe Maha, if you'd like to answer. So as Faiza says, as part of the power sector, what do you recommend may be likely to increase gender diversity? There may be roles and also benefits in the company, but having plants in remote areas always is a challenge. Any suggestions?
So that's an excellent question, and one that often comes up specifically in the power sector as well. So yes, we do understand that specifically having power plants and other remote roles is sometimes a challenge, especially when it comes to recruitment. So one of the examples that we saw were actually we worked in partnership with Engro recently because they were trying to increase the the number of females that were working in technical roles, specifically in remote locations such as power plants. And one strategy that they were able to employ, and is something that other companies can also do, is that they first contacted organizations such as Women in Energy Pakistan and other gender diverse organizations in order to ensure that they were specifically targeting females when it came to the marketing of the roles that came up as well. So they were specifically targeting and had a quota that they are going to hire female engineers for those specific roles. So that's number one, that what companies can do. And number two, what is of even more fundamental importance is that they ensured that the facilities were safe, that they had access to safe transport, that there were separate toilet facilities, and overall the women were given a security protocol as well. And so these are some these are some steps that companies can take, and of course these are steps that companies should take in order to ensure that they have more equity when it comes to recruitment, and ensuring that overall they have gender parity when it comes to female roles. We can talk in more detail as well, but that's one example that comes to mind, and something that companies can learn from, specifically from the power sector. But given the fact that we're short on time, so I won't go into too much detail. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maha. I'm sorry we can't answer any more questions, but thank you so much, everyone. And now, lastly, I'd just like to invite Nazish, who is the head of research at the Center of Excellence in Responsible Business at the Pakistan Business Council, to share some concluding remarks. Over to you, Nazish.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in this webinar. I think there was a lot of learning for all of us in this, especially, of the definition of green jobs and how green jobs also need to be decent jobs as well. So usually when you think of green, you think all is good, but sometimes you need to be aware that a green job also needs to be connected to a decent job as well. So that's a great learning. So I just want to talk a little bit about what the advantage is for businesses, for highlighting, that there are green jobs in the organization. And, when you're circulating a JD or an opening, how can, businesses, take advantage of, identifying that there are some green jobs in their organization, and, how it will end up, being linked to their overall agenda for, environmental sustainability, and always also the net zero transition as well. So, I think, there is an advantage, and I think if you do highlight it, that, this is a green job, and then at the interview level that you do ask, the applicants on, what they think of what they can add to the organization. In that sense, it will bring in a more greener perspective to the organization. So one thing is, obviously you'll get a value add in highlighting that you have so many green jobs in the organization, and the other is that you will get the people who apply for it will bring in a different perspective, because those are the people who are actually looking for green jobs as well. So that's where, that's a business case actually for, working or defining green jobs within the organization. I think we've learned quite a bit on, the ways that it could be done through, and Ayesha's and packages is limits practical way of doing it also identifies, or practitioner way of doing it identifies, also the positives that have come around for their organization in this short journey, and some barriers that have existed as well. So it's not always a smooth journey, but it can be made. The other thing is, I'd just like to highlight a question that came up by FISA about jobs, how about women in the power sector. So a company that we worked with, who has plans in, who has plans and is trying to increase the gender diversity in those plans. We mentioned toilets, but what they said was there's a need to have separate, restrooms as well, or common rooms for women where women can go and spend their free time as well. And then, when you're looking at pregnant women, or, you need to also define areas where if there is an emergency, women can go. So these are the things that also can encourage more women in those areas, and encourage parents or families to send their female members to work there as well. So these are, small things that can be done. I think it would be perhaps a good exercise to see, where the successes have been made and where they have not been made. So if we would definitely encourage you to get in touch with us and tell us your journeys, and, the progress that companies are making, and also the barriers that they're facing about hiring women in STEM, and all of that. So all of this, just to end, I'm just going to say that all of this comes under the IFC-PBC Climate2Equal platform that we have been working on with the IFC since January. So I know we have a lot of companies here today that have pledged, but if you'd still like to pledge on ensuring that diversity is part of your transition to net zero or transition to zero, please do get in touch with us. We would love more pledges and a lot more companies to talk about their journeys as well. So thank you from my end. Handing over to you, Zara.
Thanks so much, Nazish. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And a big thanks to Mohsen, Maha, and Ayesha for sharing your thoughts and your insights on this topic. Just one or two more things. One is that we really value your feedback. And so you're going to receive an email from me to fill out a really quick feedback survey. It'll literally take not more than a minute, probably. So I'd appreciate if you could kindly do that. And also, for some reason, I'm unable to share the brochure in the chat. So I'm going to email. I have all of your email addresses. And so I'll email that to all of you as well. And lastly, like Nazish mentioned, if you can all turn on your cameras if you haven't already, and we can take a screenshot.